Now, from CBS News Miami, this is Facing South Florida with Jim DeFede.
Welcome to Facing South Florida. I'm Jim DeFede. Later in the show, we will examine where some of the efforts stand in the legislature to deal with the mental health crisis in the criminal justice system. But we are going to begin today's show with a group of people who you may not see, but if you work in an office building, you should certainly appreciate. I'm talking about the janitorial workers across South Florida. In the past, we have seen custodial workers at the University of Miami have to go on hunger strikes to be treated fairly, as well as pickets and protests at downtown office buildings, all in an effort to raise their meager pay. And as a result, we have seen some improvement. Pay for many workers has increased in recent years from $8 to $13 an hour. But the workers say their fight continues, and next week, more than 1,500 of them will be voting on whether to give their union the right to call a strike if a new contract can't be negotiated. Joining me this morning is Heidi Moreno, one of those janitorial workers here in Miami, and Helene O'Brien, who leads their union, SEIU 32BJ. Helene, let me just start with you. So on Wednesday of this coming week, members will be gathering, and they're gathering already, and will be deciding whether or not to give you the authority to call a strike. What are the issues that you're dealing with right now?
The big issue, Jim, is the issue of full-time. So right now, the janitors have organized in the commercial office market here in South Florida, and they're working very hard to raise the standards and really create good jobs. Good jobs is fair pay, benefits, paid time off, and full-time. 80% of the jobs in this market right now are part-time. And it's unacceptable. It is too hard for people to live in one of the most expensive markets right now in the United States, and it's a very successful commercial office market, and have to work multiple part-time jobs. And so the janitors are pushing very hard to increase the percentage of full-time jobs being offered.
So in other words, right now, for instance, you might have at a building 20 people working 4 hours part-time. And what you'd like to see are maybe fewer part-time and more full-time employees as a result.
Yes, I mean, there's a very high turnover. There's an invisible army that comes in at 6 p.m. in all of these office buildings.
We're talking about all the major office buildings, downtown Miami, downtown Fort Lauderdale, all of these buildings. If you're in one of those big buildings downtown, more than likely one of your members is cleaning it.
Absolutely. More than 77% of the buildings have these janitors there. And 6 p.m. at night, most tenants are gone, and literally dozens of janitors come in and clean till 10 o'clock at night. And it's hard. If you look, for example, many janitors may live, say, in a community like Hialeah. They're taking a bus and a train to get to Brickell for 4 hours. It's just not going to work. And so people need a stable, good job. And that's a top priority of this campaign.
And if you have a part-time, employee on one job site, maybe they have to take 2 or 3 other part-time jobs to be able to make ends meet?
Absolutely. I mean, we have the stories of members leaving their house at 6 or 7 in the morning to go to one job. And many times either they have unreliable transportation or they're on public transportation, which takes hours, and they're running from part-time job to part-time job to part-time job.
Well, let's bring Heidi into the conversation. You're one of those janitorial workers. How hard is it to make ends meet when you're working mostly part-time jobs for different companies?
It's extremely hard to make ends meet. It would be so much easier if you just had a full-time job, made more money, and had more paid time off.
Right, that's one of the issues too.
Yeah.
You don't get necessarily holidays. You may get a couple of sick days, if that. You don't necessarily get health insurance or other major benefits. So the benefits are limited. But right now, it's mainly the issue deals with trying to get people to go from having to work several 4-hour-a-night jobs to one job that may be able to work 8 or 9 hours.
Exactly. I mean, I think the turnover in of these part-time jobs is terrible. It's very high, and it would be just much easier for a person to be able to have an 8-hour job.
Heidi, we were talking last night a little bit. You're from New York. We're actually all New Yorkers. We've got Queens, the Bronx, and Brooklyn all sitting here around the table. You come from a background in New York where you understand unions.
Exactly.
This is, in South Florida, this is a taboo word still for a lot of people. And, you're one of the few people willing to sort of speak out and willing to talk. I mean, a lot of your fellow employees, they're nervous about talking about these issues and pressing for their own rights, correct?
Correct. They get very scared because they're not used to it. Like you said, being that we come from New York, and this is something that is not strange. This is actually something that is very normal. You go get a job, and most of the times you have a union. So you apply to work somewhere, and automatically when you get hired, you already walk in the door with benefits, with someone that protects you, with rights, with respect, which is what Florida doesn't have. So when you speak to someone here about a union, people get scared and they're like, oh my God, what am I gonna do? They don't understand yet that this is just for your own benefit.
And one of the issues that I know you and I have talked about is, give me an idea of the percentage of workers who are immigrants, who don't even necessarily are fairly new to the country, may not speak English, may come from a country, Venezuela, Cuba, other places, where they're afraid to speak out and for their own rights. Talk about the challenges there.
The janitors who take care of all these beautiful properties, we've done a survey of all of them, and basically 98% are immigrants, 97.5% are immigrants from Latin America, 71% are women, and the average age is 54. We actually believe that the average commercial office janitor is Miami, is South Florida, because that's who they are. That's who we are.
I think what you just said is really important, and I don't want to just sort of go through the number. The average age is 54 years old. So
Correct.
picture a 54-year-old woman who may have come from Honduras here legally. We're not. Nobody's arguing.
Right. They're all documented.
All documented, and facing. Up until you got involved, they were making $8 or less an hour. When you started organizing a few years ago, you've been able to get their pay up, so that's good. You've been able to get some of these companies to acknowledge the collective bargaining concept, and so some of these buildings are doing the right thing by recognizing the union. Now it's that next step that you're looking for, this new contract that you have to negotiate. You want to build on it and try to get them a little bit more. You're not asking for a lot. When you say a little bit more, particularly in the area of maybe some holidays, some sick days, talk to me about that.
Yes, so basically the term we use is maturing the market. So the commercial office market here is booming. It's
a $3.5 billion, right? It's $3.5 billion in rentals.
Yes.
They're doing well.
In fact, statistically, Miami has jumped in the South Florida has jumped in the rental rates in these office buildings to the 6th most expensive market in the United States. We are more expensive than Boston, Chicago, and Los Angeles now to rent in these office buildings, and yet our janitors are in 10th place out of the 10 largest metro areas in the United States.
And one of the things, too, is it's important to remember, we talked about this as well, that all through the pandemic, even though, we saw people not necessarily going to work, those that did, the janitors still had to show up and clean, disinfect, do all the types of things that we counted on to create safe working spaces in office buildings for those who had to go in. Heidi, I want to come back to you. Just, you're proud to do the job you do, correct?
Of course.
There's no stigma in your mind to working as a janitor. You're proud of it. You don't mind working hard either.
No, not at all.
So at the end of the day, what is it that you want most of anything?
What we really want most of anything is higher pay. We want to be recognized. We want to be respected, just like other people. How do you respect someone? Showing them that their job is worth what you're asking for. Otherwise, you feel belittled, You want to feel like if you have a child in college or you need extra money for things, that you're able to take care of your stuff by being appreciated with your salary.
This coming weekend is President's Day is on Monday. That's a holiday for most folks. Here at CBS, I'm off. I have pay. Yeah. Do most janitors have the day off with pay?
No, more than 80% of the janitors, when there's a holiday, take any holiday, even like a 4th of July, most Americans like, oh yeah, we're going to have a 3-day weekend. These janitors are like, oh, I'm getting a 20% pay cut this week. They don't get paid for federal holidays. The only holiday right now that these part-time janitors get is Christmas, and the part-time janitors only get 20 hours of PTO a year. It's a lot to win.
So where do the negotiations stand right now with some of these companies?
Well, we've opened up the table. We're bargaining. Our illustrious mayor came and gave a very important message.
Mayor Daniela
Levine Cava came and basically reminded the employers that we have New York prices without New York wages, and that she hopes that some significant progress can be made. And we are meeting back tomorrow in the bargaining table, but the employers said a hard no. I'm quoting them, hard no on full-time.
Heidi, we only have about a minute. What is it that the people who are watching this right now, what is it the main thing you want them to know? What is the main message that you'd like the public, why should they care about whether or not you get a few extra days off or you get full-time pay instead of part-time pay? Why should they care?
Because without us, we are essential workers. A lot of people don't see that, but we are the ones behind the scenes. We are the ones, after you and everyone leaves, we come in, we take care of everything. We vacuum, we clean, we dust, we fingerprint. We do all the work that no one else wants to do. So we are an essential part of
Yeah. No, I get it.
The industry.
The industry,
the industry, we are.
I mean, all these big banks, all these big Fortune 500 companies, anyone that's downtown Miami, they may not understand what's going on inside their own building because the buildings have management companies and they contract.
Exactly.
They need to start paying attention.
Absolutely.
We're going to follow this. We're going to see what happens next week, and we'll keep in touch on what happens from there. Helene, Heidi, thank you very much, and good luck to you.
Thank you so much.
All right, now, when we come back, we will talk to State Representative who is trying to reform the mental health laws in Florida. Stay with us. Welcome back. Following our documentary in October, Warehouse, The Life and Death of Tristan Murphy, and our trip to Tallahassee last month with Tristan's mother, we wanted to examine whether the reforms everyone agrees are needed are actually going to be made by the legislature. And with only 3 weeks left in the session, time is running out. One legislator who has been fighting for change is Republican State Representative Pat Maney. A former judge and Army general, he has been trying to reform the Baker Act, the law that can be used by police or family members to provide emergency mental health treatment and detention for up to 72 hours for individuals who are at risk of serious bodily injury to themselves or others. Representative Maney, thank you for joining us. Give us an overview. I know that we're taping this on Thursday, and there was a committee vote this morning in which the bill to reform the Baker Act has now cleared its third committee, as I understand, unanimously. Give us a sense for what happened today and where things go from here.
In the Florida House, the bill to modernize the Baker Act and the Marchman Act was assigned 3 committees. We completed 2 of them earlier. This morning we had our third and final committee meeting. It passed 16-0, so that means every single committee we've gone through has been unanimous, and we're now ready for floor action. So this is the farthest I've ever gotten this bill. And I think before anybody before me has been able to get the bill. So I'm very excited, very optimistic that with the Speaker's support, we'll get this bill heard before the full House, and my sense is it will pass.
Now, it's interesting. I couldn't help but notice that when you started talking about it, I referred to it as reform and you referred to it as modernization. I think that there's a little bit of wordplay there because I think some of your colleagues don't like the word reform, and so modernizing it, I think, the semantics of it has helped. But let's move beyond the semantics. Give us a sense for what are the key aspects of this bill that are important, that you think are necessary, and that you're hoping will pass not just in the House, but in the Senate and be signed by the governor as well?
Jim, first off, the Baker Act is over 50 years old, and the Marchman Act is over 30 years old. So there's been a lot of scientific research, a lot of new medicines. There's just a lot that's changed. Our society's changed in 50 years or even 30 years. So the point of the bill is to address those changes, capture the good things from those changes and the strengths that we get from them, and to address the weaknesses that we have in our society. So the bill is designed to protect liberty, to get better outcomes for patients, to reinforce law enforcement, public safety, help our families, because when somebody is suffering from either mental illness or substance use disorder or both, they affect everybody around them. And so this bill is designed to meet those needs. It has a lot of mechanical kind of systemic changes, which may not interest your audience at all, but it's going to make the system much easier. It's hard. It's emotionally hard for families to go down to the courthouse and try to have a loved one involuntarily picked up for a mental health or substance use examination. And these changes have been designed to make that an easier process as far as the emotional trauma they have to go through to make it happen.
Now, let me just jump in here for a second, Representative, because and I think those are the positive aspects, also trying to work a little bit more so that beyond the 72 hours that a person may be held, that there's some planning for what happens next. I think that's part of what you're hoping to achieve, but also the issue of, I want you to address that, but also I know one of the criticisms has been, and one of the things that you had fought for in previous years, was to expand the scope of the Baker Act so that more people, so that you didn't necessarily have to be of imminent bodily injury to yourself, that more people could basically receive the help that they need. But I know that there's a push and pull between civil libertarians who are concerned that this could be abused in a way of locking people up, particularly the homeless, versus, you know, the greater needs of society and the needs to get people help and assistance. That's not in this bill. Are you disappointed that that broader scope is not in this year's bill?
Well, first off, I think those fears are misplaced. I think basically we have a known population, a relatively well-defined population of people who have mental health and substance use disorder problems. But we see them in the system in multiple places. We see them in the mental health system. We see them in the jails. We see them in the prisons. And these people often rotate through those agencies, plus at times the providers. And so I'm not concerned that the system will be overloaded. It is true that this year there was not the appetite to redefine the criteria. But let me tell you a piece of good news. The legislature, at least in the House, with leadership support, appropriated $50 million additional dollars so that we can better treat people, provide that planning, provide the warm handoff, those sorts of things that we can use to keep the patients, once they get out of the hospital, from falling through the crack and then coming back into the system involuntarily again. So as far as looking at the criteria, I think we'll do that next year. This is a very complex problem. it impacts so many other things, like for folks who are aged and may have dementia or Alzheimer's. That's something we're going to have to look at. We're going to have to look at the situation of children in school and being subject to Baker Act and their transportation. I can't imagine anything much more traumatic for a child, a relatively small child perhaps, being handcuffed and walked out of school and put in the back seat of a law enforcement car.
And so let me just jump in here, because we only got a couple minutes left, and obviously you want to avoid that, and that's where some of these reforms will come in. You know, you talk about the additional $50 million, you talk about the positive aspects of the reform. I know there are a couple of other bills that are also working their way through dealing with mental health. You know, from a big picture standpoint, you've been trying to fight and argue about this since you joined the legislature a few years back. You dealt with this when you were a judge in the Panhandle. Are you more optimistic today than you were a few years ago? And why do you think the legislature is finally getting that appetite to tackle such a difficult issue, and one that often stirs controversy?
I'm more optimistic because I've seen positive movement and I've seen interest. The fact that we haven't had a single legislator ask a negative question or vote against the bill so far shows me that the education of the legislature, educating them to the problems, is been a big part of our success, just like leadership. I mean, leadership matters in everything we do. Every organization, corporate or nonprofit or government, leadership matters. And we now have leadership that understands the challenge and is willing to take it on. They're not afraid of a difficult problem. This bill is 122 pages long. The bill analysis was 33 pages long. But it also deals with things like people who are incompetent to proceed in a criminal case. So we're addressing both the civil aspect and the criminal aspect and trying to make sustainable, substantive improvements for the people of the state of Florida.
Well, let me jump in here again. You talk about leadership, and that's always been one of the difficult things is when you have a new speaker every 2 years, one speaker's priorities may not carry over to the next speaker's priorities. But in my conversations with the new incoming speaker, who will be Danny Perez from down here, and I believe you've had discussions with him, this is a subject that he's willing to continue to build on with you. Is that correct?
That is my understanding. I spoke with him literally not more than 30 minutes ago and gave him a report, and he supports it. Speaker Renner has certainly supported it. Well, so I think the gentleman who's going to follow Speaker Perez will support it. He's very invested. Both of those men have been supportive of my efforts so far.
Representative Maney, I gotta sort of bring it in here. I'm happy that things are moving in the House. I think things will also be moving in the Senate, and we'll stay on top of that. And anything we can do to help it push it along, let us know.
I certainly will. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Representative Maney. All right. Thank you very much.
Bye.
We'll be right back after the break. If you have any thoughts or comments, feel free to contact me at jdefede@cbs.com. I do enjoy hearing from you. Well, that's all the time we have. We'll be back again next week. Thanks for watching, and enjoy the rest of your day.